Hey everyone, welcome to Check In to Check Out. I'm Justin Ehrenstein, the CPO of Mobile First, and alongside me I have Connor Burke, the Director of Optimization at Mobile First. So Connor, tell me, what was your biggest failure this week?
Wow. My biggest failure. I think it would have to be wearing shorts to our partner's sales convention. I showed up and everybody's in blazers and ties and suits, and I'm in a t-shirt and shorts. It said road show, so in my defense, I thought it would be casual, but
I understand where you're coming from. I had on nice pants,
yeah.
at least as nice as I will ever wear, but I felt really bad for you because you were
Yeah,
dressed.
I now learned to. I think I'll just overdress for these things in the future. I'm not gonna listen to when the businesses say road show. They don't think they mean real road show. I think they mean
They don't
yeah,
know what a road show
they mean
is.
business formal. My bad.
Well, I'll say my biggest failure is I have about 8 things on my to-do list that I really need to get done this week that I've not yet gotten done that really need to get done for my clients next week.
Yeah, that stuff
Somehow,
happens.
yeah, they'll have to get done. Well, I'm really excited about this week's guest. I thought he was absolutely fascinating. Luis just really schooled us in how to use e-commerce to build a brand. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I loved it. He had a lot of great ideas that I believe I've thought about myself, maybe arrived at independently, but didn't put into words as well as he did. He talks a lot about how building brand equity is now synonymous with that conversion funnel for a lot of brands. And I thought that was something that we've seen with our clients in the past, the things that we're actively working on now, but I have never framed it in that way. And I love that. He also had a lot of great ideas behind what's coming down the pipeline for this industry, things about AI, how people are finding products, how they're researching brands. A lot of this information I think is going to resonate with anybody who's in the e-commerce space, whether you're a director or a designer or a developer. So I'm excited for people to listen to this. They're going to get a lot out of it. I know we did, but I think it's going to be great.
She said, "Excuse me, can I check in?" Says the manager, "How long you staying?" She says, "One night, maybe two. Well, I'm just passing through. I'm just passing through." And I said, "Check in, check out, check in, check out, check in."
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Luis. We're really happy to have you. Just to kind of get started, how are you feeling today? I know it's Friday. You got any good weekend plans?
I do. I do. I'm feeling great. I am very excited because I have a new video game to play, Clara Obscure 33, giving them a little bit of a shout out. It's a new studio, created a fantastic role-playing game. So that makes me very happy. Anime season is coming back in June, so can't complain.
Nice. Yeah, we were talking about that right before we started recording the Clara Obscura. I'm excited to play that myself. That sounds
It's such a breath of fresh air.
yeah.
I mean, what it feels like a world of sequels. Suddenly somebody comes up with a completely original IP. I'm so happy. You have no idea.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of the gaming executives are like, how did they do this? There's no microtransactions. There's no
Yeah, yeah.
hidden fees or,
It's
whatever.
shocking. It's shocking how the video game industry gets shocked when somebody puts passion into something and creates a good product and that
Right.
doesn't need microtransactions.
Yeah.
Shocker.
It's amazing what a good story will do for your revenue.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. So yeah, that's why I'm excited. I'm looking forward to a weekend where I can play a 12-hour day.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm a little jealous. So very jealous actually. What's your current role and what do you own in that?
Yes, so I am currently the Senior Director for Digital Route to Consumer at Moët Hennessy, which, putting simpler terms in other organizations, it's a head of e-commerce. I oversee 3 key areas within e-commerce at Moët Hennessy. And by the way, just to clarify, for those who don't know Moët Hennessy, it's one of the biggest alcohol groups out there. We own Veuve Clicquot, Dom Perignon, Hennessy, of course, Glenmorangie, Ardbeg. So Very,
Wow.
very, very, very excellent liquid. I would say it's excellent liquid even if I didn't work for them because they're one of the category leaders, and these brands have history that is. Let's put it this way: it was here before we arrived. They're going to be here after we leave. That's how
Oh,
powerful
wow.
they are. And I oversee three key areas. So I oversee what we call business to consumer, which is how our brands selling directly to our consumers, leveraging channels like DoorDash, Instacart, Uber Eats, etc. B2B, which is how do we work with our distributors in ensuring that we are selling properly from distributor to retail, and in a very small portion, direct to consumer, which is not true direct to consumer because you can't really do that in the US with the three-tier system, but it's anything that the consumer perceives as direct to consumer, which is in the end, it doesn't matter what's happening in the back of a website. It matters what the consumer is feeling, that who they are transacting with. And that's why we call it direct to consumer. So I oversee those three areas and a couple of other digital topics in the organization.
That's awesome. Can you explain for some of our listeners that don't know, what is the three-tier system?
Yes. Wow. How much time do you have? So the three-tier system is a law from the dry years in the United States. So about 1920s. We're talking Al Capone. Yes, it is a law from back then. It's 100 and something years old, where they established that from an alcohol route to market perspective, suppliers like us who create the liquid and import the liquid cannot distribute the liquid to retailers, and distributors then have to sell to retailers. We also cannot sell direct to retailers, and we cannot sell direct to consumer. So a three-tier means that supplier sells to distributor, distributor sells to retail, retail sells to consumer. One and the other cannot coexist. They need to be completely separate. This was a way to control, to a certain extent, how much liquid was existed in the market, ensure that the government had an understanding of basically how alcohol was being transacted. It hasn't changed since then. It's still very much in place, and we have to work in those restrictions, which then brings us also to the digital topic, right? Which is digital was probably the first opportunity that alcohol brands had to engage directly with their consumers, because before this it was quite complicated. It happened in bars, it happened in accounts, but this ability to talk directly to consumers, show your brand, show your personality, show your tone of voice, show your content, that really was difficult before digital. And so digital has become such a fascinating opportunity for this space, where the three-tier system, while very needed when it was established, sometimes does not think of the consumer as the main objective.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I've
Fascinating
never
is a
heard
good
that
word for
before.
it.
Yeah, I worked in the service industry for years when I was much younger, and I've actually never heard of the three-tier system. So that's really interesting.
Yep. Listen, when it was established, it was needed. Distributor partners are, I will say, fundamental to our work. They know the market, they know how things operate. I think it's just when it comes to consumer relationships and consumer expectations that sometimes the three-tier system can be complicated, right? Because the consumer is expecting, I'm talking to this brand, I want to get the service from this brand, but in fact they're not. It's all intermediated, which sometimes becomes difficult to explain why they might get frustrated with certain parts of the equation or some slowness in some processes. So I think over time, as consumer demand goes up, as consumers' expectations go up, I think certain parts of the three-tier system are going to have to learn to play with each other much better.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So what's your day-to-day look like? You have a pretty broad role. How big's your team, and what's that interaction like day to day?
So I have a team of about 7 people between direct reports, indirect reports, divided about a third in them between B2B, B2C, and DTC. What does my day-to-day look like? So I'm not a morning person. I'm a evening person. So I tend to arrive at work around 9. Usually I tend to look at my calendar and I tend to revise my calendar on a daily basis. So I tend to be very stacked with meetings with several topics, as you might imagine. But I look at my calendar very much how I look at a social media calendar. I used to manage social media before, which is if you set up a calendar on social media a month in advance and you don't revise it the day that you're making the post, you could have a problem, right? Because you might be tone deaf to what might be happening in society. If I don't revise my meeting calendar to understand if those meetings are still relevant that day, if there's nothing else that is more important, then I'm also doing a massive disservice to myself. And so my day always starts by looking at the calendar, understanding what's coming up, what needs to be done by what time, and is that day delivering against it. And then ultimately I work with my different team members in understanding what are we doing, for example, with the marketplaces? What's the current performance of our brands? What then can we do to, if anything can be done to optimize, or do we focus on something that is coming up next to ensure that we're ready to get it done? Managing also internal stakeholders is quite a bit of part of the job, right? So I sit in the center of excellence. So I should have said that at the beginning, which is my team specifically is transversal to the entire Moët Hennessy portfolio. We don't sit on a brand team. Because of that, we are in the center of excellence, where you concentrate capabilities like CRM, e-commerce, media, content production, etc. And in my case, because I'm transversal to all the brands, it is important for me to spend quite a bit of time with my brand stakeholders, right? Mm-hmm. The brands are working across many things at the same time. E-commerce is not their only priority. And so being sure that I'm sitting with them, understanding what their objectives are, understanding what is changing in the market, and how can we, with some agility, adapt, that's ultimately what one of my key roles is. So my days are really spent between understanding and optimizing the different funnels that we're operating in, out of which I will say I have a fantastic team. So I'm very blessed and lucky that I have people that do this very well, which then allows me to work much more on internal stakeholder management, brand management, and trying to think ahead what the next 3 to 5 years might look like so that we can start setting the right stepping stones to get there.
Interesting. That is a lot. That sounds like a lot of work. I would ask, I actually have two kind of follow-up questions to that. One is that I think a lot of e-commerce directors tend to face like burnout, and I think it's because of those things. You're in charge of so many different channels. Do you feel like there's anything that you do specifically to help manage that?
That's a really good question. I think it's about being very clear on what's driving what. I am very much a cause effect person. I'm actually rereading the book. So do you know the Thinking Fast and Slow book?
I don't.
System 1, System 2. So it's a book that basically explains, it won a Nobel Prize for, I think, finance or something. Don't quote me on that. But it basically established that people basically have two systems when interacting with brands or interacting with each other, or basically in life. System 1 is instinctive, gut-based, fast. System 2 is considerate, intellectual, and it takes a little bit longer, right? System 1 is going to be Homer Simpson. System 2 is going to be Darwin, thinking through things and being less reactive to things, right? Assuming Darwin was like that. And so when I think about it, when I think of e-commerce, I think about it in the exact same way, right? Are we triggering system 1? Are we triggering system 2, right? If you think of our category, e-commerce for alcohol is still quite nascent. It accelerated during COVID for all the reasons you'd expect. But we see consumers post-COVID wanting to go back to bars, wanting to go back to stores, wanting to go back to the way that they purchased and they interacted with the category, right? And so because it's still nascent, when I say that we have to work on system 1 and system 2, it's because on one side, we need to give the right level of impulse purchase triggers that operate in the digital space that most brands operate from an e-commerce perspective, right? Right picture at the right time. It's the difference between showing a cocktail picture to a consumer at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, which, why are we doing that? That is not the right time to do it, and consumers probably don't resonate, versus showing it to a consumer at 9 p.m. on a Friday, where there's a statistical probability that they are sitting at a bar and there's a likelihood that they could pick my brand, right? And so triggering system 1 is going to be, how do you get that consumer to see the asset at the right time so that it triggers something immediately? A system 2 is going to be, how do I get this consumer to consider buying online when they mostly buy offline? And that's going to take much more time because you're actually changing behaviors, you're changing beliefs, you're changing other triggers on the consumer. So to answer your question directly, which, as you can tell, I can go on tangents very fast. To answer your question directly, the way to stay focused is understanding, one, which of the systems are you driving and what is really making a difference. It's about identifying those pockets of energy where you can really understand and drive the business forward, and those pockets where things might not be progressing and being stubborn on it is maybe not going to work right now, and you might have to give it more time. If we use the video game analogy again, if you're fighting a boss and you're not beating him or her or whatever the boss is, you put the remote down, you step away, you come back the next day, and you probably will beat it then. Yes. That's how I try to manage my day. It's ultimately understanding, can I beat the boss today?
Yes, that's funny. The total opposite of my method, which is you just keep doing the same thing against the boss and you don't change your strategy and you just think next time it'll work.
No, I've tried to do that. It does not work for me. I become very irritated when I do that. So for me, it's about, you try it a couple of times and then just put the control down.
Yeah.
And step away.
I think that's a great answer, and that's honestly a really good snippet. I feel like that's going to be something that we can really use for this episode.
Nice.
I have one more follow-up question to that, which was just given the amount of things that you've done, and how long did you say you've been with Moët Hennessy?
I've been with Moët Hennessy 6 years, but just to give you an idea, I've been in digital for almost 19 years. I mean,
Okay.
I was developing websites in Flash, just to give you
Oh,
an
wow.
idea.
Yeah.
But I've been in alcohol for 12 years and 6 years at Moët Hennessy. Previously, I was at Pernod Ricard.
Okay. Perfect. So I was going to think in the time that you've been there, has there been anything that you think you've made the biggest impact on?
Absolutely. I would say I like to consider myself a digital maven. I love digital. I love digital. I love technology. I love the way that it can impact people and it can impact organizations. So my approach to digital has always been what I call a sociological approach to digital, because what I'm interested about digital is the way that it changes how your brain works and how you operate. And I always like to use the example of the digital brain on how we used to think about things and remember things versus how we do now. And the analogy that I always use is if we were sitting, the three of us together a couple of years back, and we'd be talking about, I don't know, Snow White, the new movie. And we'd be like, who's the actress who plays the queen? We'd be chatting until one of our brains suddenly goes, oh, it's Gal Gadot. What
Not
happens
having to go to
nowadays
look it
is,
up.
what is the actress that is? Yep, Gal Gadot. So what happens is you freed up your brain to do something completely different, and you're relying on the digital extension that exists at the palm of your hand to do some of the tasks that you used to do. And I know a lot of people criticize it and say that, oh, but this means our memories are not working the same way, etc. Well, this is how humanity evolves. As technologies become available, your brain adapts and focuses on what those enabling technologies get you to do. So I gave you all this very long explanation why. That's, I think, the biggest difference of what I've been able to drive in my companies, that I've been advocating for digital. I've been advocating for the fact that it's not digital for the sake of digital. It's digital for the sake of the consumer. It's digital for the sake of our retailers. Digital because the human behavior has gone there and it's become an extension of our being. And if we don't know how to utilize it, we have a competitive disadvantage. And that's not the way to go. And so the big difference of what I think I've been able to do with Moët Hennessy in the last couple of years was bring things like CRM to the forefront, being much more mindful with how we do our consumer relationship management, be much more mindful of what do we want the consumers to think, feel, do with us in these digital spaces. A very traditional company. I mean, our business is still very much done through the craft of our liquid and the richness of our brands. There's some apprehension if digital is the right channel to deliver against those messages. What I've been able, I believe, to do for the last couple of years is get the organization to believe, actually, yes, it's the first time we've had an opportunity to interact with our consumers on a daily basis, because before digital existed, we couldn't do it. It's the first opportunity we have to really learn who we're talking to and understand what do they care about it? How can we deliver against it? And that's really what I think has been the impact that I've been trying to drive within Moët Hennessy. Don't know how successful I've been. I believe I've been successful, but I'm going to keep beating the drum, because I think it's a cause worth fighting.
Yeah, I love that answer, and we're big fans of any kind of additional information you can get. So these long answers are perfect. Trust me, I'd rather that than just,
Sorry, I just talk a lot.
improved
I
ads.
just go.
Yeah, but it's like I said, it's much better than some of these other shorter answers where it's just like a simple, no extra detail. So we love this, and that's a phenomenal answer. That's such a great.
Thank you.
So are you guys starting to get real feedback from the customer, whether it's an app, website, whatever, and actually have real conversations with the customer? Conversations, is that?
We try to have it as much as possible. And bear in mind, I'm trying to be mindful of how much I represent, and that this is a small disclosure, which is I'm trying to be careful how much I disclose of Moët Hennessy specifically. I want to make sure that I'm focusing more on what I do and my capabilities,
Sure.
etc., versus sounding like I'm representing what Moët Hennessy does, because that's where territories get finicky. Can you imagine if you didn't cut this? It would be
Anything
awesome.
you say that you maybe don't want to share, or if you get off the call later today and you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, definitely email us.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
can
yeah.
always-
No, I'm not.
always cut
I'm
that.
not concerned. I will always give you these addendums. The only thing I will ask you is anything that it sounds like I'm representing the company institutionally that I'd like to stay away of. It's not a problem. I do a lot of these and they quote me and they say Moët Hennessy and LVMH, but I try to as much as possible that because my head of comms is always like, Luis, stop doing podcasts where you're talking about us without validating with me because you go off the rails and you just start talking. Thankfully, I never said anything that they were embarrassed of, but I gotta be careful about it. So let me go to the beginning of the question. So when it comes to alcohol and consumers interacting online, I think that I think it is our objective to have consumer conversations as much as possible. And I believe that having consumer conversations is fundamental, especially in the space that exists nowadays. I think even considering the advent of AI and the fact that people are more and more having conversations with machines, I think if people are expecting that level of relationship with brands where it's much more of a fluid conversation rather than here's the post, I liked it, now I'm going to go to the store and buy it. I think that's becoming a little bit obsolete, right? The challenge becomes on the fact that we are rightfully so a restricted category, right? So you can abuse alcohol. That's something that we fight against full-heartedly. We really believe in responsible consumption. That's also because we're not necessarily, we're brands at a specific price point. We're not brands that are even lending themselves to any type of abuse because that's not what we want. And when it comes to the discussion online with consumers, it can be tricky, right? Because sometimes you don't know exactly who's the person on the other side. You don't know what's their relationship with the category. And so we are very mindful when having these back and forth conversations that first we get permission from the consumer to interact as an alcohol brand, and two, that the conversation stays to what is relevant to the consumer. It's not a sales pitch. It's not to try and get you to drink more. It's to allow you to understand the brand better. It's allow you to make better decisions when picking an alcohol brand. It's allow you to fall in love with the universe that we're trying to deliver. That's much more, I think, the focus of what we try to do when entertaining conversations. Unfortunately, sometimes we're not able to have full-blown conversations because of some legal remit and because we don't know who's on the other side, and we need to be careful about it.
Fascinating. It's not an issue I feel like most e-commerce directors we talk to deal with. And I mean, it's part of the industry, obviously, but it's just such
it's specific to this industry. It's very specific. It's and what's interesting about it as well is again, if we go back to consumer expectations, consumers expect every brand to behave the same way online to each other, right? They expect that if, I don't know, Domino's sent me a funny meme, of course I can talk to Veuve Clicquot and they can send me a funny meme. You probably are not going to get a funny meme also from I don't know, other restricted categories, right? There's categories that just need to be a little bit more careful about it because there's risks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Bank of America has never made a joke to me.
Yeah, so you don't see a lot of jokes in the Centra Health
Banking.
or something. Yeah.
No, in the banking, I think the good news is that our category is actually quite lighthearted. There's very little about alcohol that is very serious and we're lighthearted, but as a category, it's more about just understanding the tone of the conversation, the topics of the conversation, and guaranteeing that we maintain it at a space that is about the brand and about the universe and about the experience the consumer can have with us and the quality of our products, and less about any type of consumption suggestions.
So let's look back at your career a little. And you kind of gave us a little bit of a tidbit. Starting Flash, how did you get into kind of e-commerce, head of e-commerce? What's that journey to get there?
Jesus, how long do you have? Okay. How far back do you want me to go? Do you want me to start right at the beginning?
Whatever you think is most entertaining. Tell me a story. We can a story.
Okay. So it was 1982. I'm joking. No. It was 1982. The world. No. So I'm going to start relatively early, but I promise I'm going to do, this is going to be a little bit like Lost. You see a flashback and then I'm going to bring us back to the present very fast.
Perfect.
Basically, I always loved digital. It's been my passion point, as you can tell, with video games. I was speed tuning my computer when it was a Pentium or a Pentium 2. I was already playing with the hardware of the computer. So I love digital, but I never wanted to be in technology as an engineer, developer, etc. Because I actually love marketing. Love consumer behavior, love sociology. So I always have these two parts of my brain that operate at the same time. One that is very technology forward, one that is very human centric. And so I ended up landing in digital marketing as a degree and as a master's. Now, we could all question what's the value of a digital marketing master's in the year 2006, where Facebook didn't even exist. So that's just saying. And so I started going from digital marketing immediately got me into an agency world because I thought to myself, I needed to learn more than what I learned in school, because while my education was fantastic, it did not give me practical implementation skills on digital marketing. Right? You were learning a lot of the theory. And so I wanted to go to an agency first because I knew agencies where you really get a fantastic experience to understand the space. And so I was an account manager and then a web strategist at an agency. I was living in Portugal at the time. So that's something I didn't mention. I'm South African born, raised in Portugal, but now I'm an American citizen.
Interesting.
Portugal, I was working for this agency who gave me the entire knowledge that I needed to know. So, because I was managing everything for these customers. So I had clients like Samsung, BNP Paribas, Procter and Gamble, Coca-Cola. And so with them, I had to do everything. I had to do everything from a pitch to now we're going to build your website, to doing wireframes, to doing site testing, to even editing HTML when I had to building media plans, to building e-commerce plans. So on the agency side, I kind of got my training wheels across almost everything that I was doing. Also, I will need to give this shout out to Portugal, which is Portugal was a country that adopted digital technologies at a speed that very few other countries adopted at the time. Most people in Portugal had a mobile phone before most people in the US had a mobile phone. Now, of course, we're comparing very different country sizes slightly, but Portugal has always been at the forefront of digital adoption. We love technology. It's fascinating. And so I got the chance to play with a lot of these spaces at the time. And then I did my time with the agency world, and I decided now I want to implement this in one vertical. And so I moved over to Samsung, where I was doing digital influencer management and content creation for smart TV apps. This was when smart TVs were becoming a thing. And basically, I was trying to convince suppliers to create, hey, CNN, can you create an experience in a smart TV ecosystem that is not a phone, so you can't really touch it? It needs to be a lean back experience. How do we work on this?
But only for Samsung. Only
for Samsung. And then I eventually got offered a position to come over to the United States to work for Pernod Ricard. They were looking for somebody to help accelerate digital in Latin America specifically, but the headquarters were here in New York. And so again, I moved to the United States, and I spent the next 3 years in Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, working with those teams in developing their entire digital strategy. Be it from how do we think about media, how do we think budget allocation, etc. So at this point, I was already working with e-commerce. Let's shift a couple of years forward. I spent a couple of years working on the alcohol business and did many roles within it, be it head of digital, be it head of CRM. More recently, I was the general manager for the whiskeys portfolio here at Moët Hennessy. I was managing Glenmorangie, Ardbeg, Sir Davis, Woodinville. And I literally, the one thing that I was missing as a job function that I hadn't fully owned end to end as a title was e-commerce. So I had been head of social, I had been head of CRM, I had been omni-channel, I had been managing the P&L of a brand. All I was missing was a little bit more commercial experience. But because I didn't want to go into pure sales, because I'm not a traditional salesperson, I thought e-commerce was the right space. And so I got the opportunity to go into e-commerce, which is where I am now. So it's a very long way to say it. Actually, going into e-commerce was more about going into digital and working on the different pieces of the digital ecosystem and then understanding there's a piece here that I actually haven't owned full time that I really want to own and I want to drill, because otherwise it might be a gap in my skill set if I don't do it with this level of intention.
That's a great answer. It sounds like a natural
A long
progression.
answer.
Tying it back to the video game. It's another path you needed to level up in. But I love that. It sounds like you had a lot of skills across the spectrum, and this was the thing that you felt, how do I apply all of those into something that has meaning? And this is where it led you. So I love that answer.
I'm a bit of a Pokemon collector when it comes to skills. It's I'm less interested in becoming a specialist in just one. Like I'm not going to be the psychic expert or the fire expert. I kind of like collecting them all. So my career has always been about what else can I learn? What else can I understand? What else am I missing? And I've been lucky because companies like Moët Hennessy have actually given me that opportunity. They've allowed me to be a general manager. They've allowed me to be a senior director of strategy and transformation. They believed in my talent and they gave me the opportunity to execute it, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, I love the Pokemon reference. You're not a gym trainer. You're a real Ash Ketchum,
Exactly. No. Gym trainers just stick to one discipline, one thing. No. That's not me. I get bored too fast.
Fair.
That's awesome. A couple questions. How many languages do you speak?
Fluently, 3. Okay. Not fluently, 5.
Impressive.
So I speak fluently Portuguese, Spanish, and English. I read and I hear French fluently. I mean, I've been working for French companies for 17 years because the first agency I worked on was French-based, and then Pernod Ricard and Moët Hennessy. And I did German in school, so I can read most of German fine. It's just difficult to talk. Because I love anime and video games, I ended up also picking up a little bit of Japanese, so I can read some katakana, some hiragana, etc. Can't do it fluently, but I'll watch an anime while I'm looking on the side. I'll pick up some random stuff. So a couple of languages.
Yeah, that's funny. I play music, and my mother asked me the other day, how many instruments do you play or whatever, and I think offhand, several I dabble in, but then I was like, if I had to go to the Grammys, I only play guitar and piano. That's it.
Yeah.
There's only two really at the end of the day that I play. But if you ask me, on the sidewalk. Yeah, I play a couple.
Yeah, no. One has to always LA twist it a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
All right, so you've actually had an incredible career so far, a lot of accomplishments. More interestingly, at least for me, is what are some of your failures? What have you learned from in the past?
I've learned a lot. I've failed a lot, and I've learned a lot from it. I think the biggest failure that I probably seen that I've done in the past that sometimes comes back to haunt me just because it kind of repeats itself, and I'll explain why, is sometimes losing focus of what need or what objective are we really trying to achieve with consumers when doing something? What behavior and what is the added value? I've launched properties in the past where, from a brand perspective, from a company perspective, from a business objective perspective, made complete sense, but then would realize when the consumers interacted with it that it made no sense for them. It actually, the offering was not right, the experience was not right, and for us, it all made sense. Why? Because we were completely talking to ourselves. We were talking to what our business goals are, etc. And at a certain point, we completely forgot who we were selling to and what they actually wanted. So I've had a couple of instances where I might have launched one or two properties with a specific offering and assortment. The site looks gorgeous. It's mobile compatible. It's everything. And then we realize, actually, the consumer doesn't want to buy products from just one brand. They want to buy products from an assortment of brands, right? So, for example, empowering a .com of a brand that is not a single purchase brand, but it's mostly purchased in combination with other items. AKA, a lot of people do their wine purchase together with their grocery shopping, right? Trying to create a single brand focus on one brand that is not well known by consumers and creating an e-commerce engine and launching it, it doesn't mean people are going to come and buy. You could create whatever you want. They don't care. They'll come in and they say, wait, I can only buy wine here? No. I want to go also buy my meat. I also want to buy whiskey. You're only selling wine? Why am I buying from this? So that was probably the biggest lesson, and the biggest thing that I always try to keep in mind is the amount of times that I have to sit in front of campaigns, strategies, things we put forward and look at it and say, okay, let me forget I work for this company and let me pretend I'm a consumer. Do I care? And the amount of times that nowadays I'm like, actually, I don't. Those were what I learned from my failures in the past, is learning to stop for a second and saying, if I'm an actual consumer, would I care about this? Quite honestly, if brands, and by the way, I did this on, of course, e-commerce, but I've also done this, for example, managing social media. I think a lot of brands, if they really looked at their own content and thought to themselves, what do I, as a human and as a consumer, feel about this? They would be quite blah about most of their content. Because institutionally, it sounds good. For the brand, it sounds good, but it's boring. Or it's not addressing what consumers are looking for in a given channel, right? What are you looking for when you're on Instagram? You're looking for a laugh. You're looking for an insight. You're looking for a piece of culture. You're looking to belong. You're not looking for a lifestyle picture. Like, name the last time you visited a brand page because I wonder if there's a lifestyle picture of Domino's. Like, nobody does that, but yet content calendars are full of those. So I would say that that's the biggest failure I've had in the past was forgetting the consumer, and I think that's what I always try to keep in mind in everything that I do moving forward.
There was a McDonald's commercial I remember when I was younger that my friends and I used to make fun of, where it was just like five guys playing basketball, and then at the end they just be like, we should go to McDonald's, and that was the whole commercial. No food, no nothing. It was just a life. They were just selling like a lifestyle or a culture for it. And it's interesting because it's like, I mean, does that work? Because that doesn't really make me want McDonald's. Yeah.
The plug-in at the end, I'll send you guys a meme. There's a video that I saw that was amazing, which is this entire commercial about a woman and her dog and the relationship with the dog. And it's all very, very sentimental. And at the end, it's a commercial for toilet paper. I'm like, guys, what are we talking about? No, but she did it on purpose. It's a mockery of it's a mockery of every brand commercial during Super Bowl.
Right. That's funny.
It's fascinating. So I think that's honestly the biggest thing I've learned over the years is that, yes, you might be answering to your stakeholders or your shareholders, but don't forget your shareholders are not necessarily who's buying from you.
That's so true. I was literally at a conference yesterday, and it's like, this is so boring. Like, it was a corporate conference where they were trying to train the customers how to buy more product. I was like, this is so boring. Make it entertaining, and then I'll listen to what you have to say. But why? Like, I'm just going to be in my computer.
Interesting, or give it an insight, or get a good speaker, or change the content, change the creative, change something.
Yeah,
I'm with you. Sometimes we forget about what is the person on the other side going to feel about this.
Totally. Completely agree. All right, you've been incredibly insightful so far. Really enjoy everything we're talking about. We're going to get to the checkout portion, kind of looking ahead. So how are you using e-commerce to improve brand equity?
I love this question, by the way. Of course I love it because we agreed on it.
Well,
But no, I'm just breaking the fourth and the fifth and the sixth wall. Listen, I think we're in an interesting place right now with e-commerce, right? Because first of all, this idea of the consumer funnel, right? Awareness, consideration, conversion, loyalty, the funnel is completely flattened. Right? We went from these things taking sometimes days, weeks, years to be built to I see it, I swipe up, I buy. I don't know where this is coming from, but it has a very weird address, but it doesn't matter because it was on Instagram, I trust it, I'm going to buy it. This means that e-commerce nowadays is not just a conversion engine, it's also a brand builder, ultimately. Why do I say this? Because the true luxury, and I'm about to be very cliche with this, but the true luxury that you can give consumers is time and its seamlessness. The best brand experience nowadays is a seamless, fast shopping experience if that's what you as a consumer are looking for. I usually like to say when one thinks about luxury, that luxury needs to feel fast but build slow. It feels fast and convenient, and it provides the service that you expect from a luxury brand. But the building of the brand itself is slow because it's about building credibility. It's about building quality credentials. It's about building all the steps that take you to a specific price point that you're trying to practice. So where does e-commerce come into play with all of this? I think every brand needs to understand that e-commerce drives brand building through the seamlessness of it. So if you're a brand that doesn't think about how do I make this transaction experience either very seamless or very added value to my consumer, I might get purchases, which delivers against conversion goals, which might be the main KPI you're looking at, but you're actually not building the brand. You're not doing anything that consumer will then talk to their friends or will want to come back and return for that experience. That's point number one. And that comes down just to the pure experience of it, very systems one, right? The second part of it is brand discovery. We are in an environment where there's media saturation. Consumers are bombarded with advertising. It's becoming more and more intense. And the ability to show up when consumers are in the mindset to think about you has become more fundamental when it comes to brand building. AKA, I might not think about sparkling wine all day long, but I'm going to think about it when I'm on Instacart or on DoorDash or on Uber Eats, and I'm thinking about what am I going to eat tonight? What am I going to buy? And exposing a consumer to a product there would be considered by many people now, well, not nowadays, previously, as a very lower funnel. Oh, you're not building brand, you're just making them aware of the product. Well, if nowadays the brand experience or consumption of a product has been extremely facilitated because of e-commerce, aka getting a brand to your hands to try the product has become easier, then if you're not present on these platforms where they are maybe discovering products and ordering them to try them out, you actually might be missing on the entire brand discovery funnel, where it might actually start at the last 3 feet.
So can I rephrase that another way?
Okay.
Make sure I completely understand. Are you saying brand building and transactional is happening at the same place and time? And
Yes.
They are not separate as we used to think of them, but it is one unified experience now.
I believe that it is. Now, it's not all the time. Of course, we can't generalize, right? There's certain consumers and certain products. I mean, like buying a Coke or buying a car, very different purchase journeys, very different time that it takes. Doesn't matter how many people want to put Carvana, you can buy your car online. I think some people are still going to want to go to the car dealership and see the car for real, right?
Yes.
We need to give the experience the consumer is looking for. What we need to understand is what is the right place where we need to show up and where are consumers becoming aware of brands and considering brands. And a lot of the times it's in social, but more and more it's happening on transactional channels. Think about Amazon, right? How many people do the full brand discovery for gifting inside Amazon? They don't leave Amazon. They look at the reviews. They look at the Amazon best list. They're doing their entire brand discovery there. And if they don't find the brand on Amazon, what do they think? This brand is strange. I don't know who this is, but they're not available on Amazon. Now, of course, in our category is different because we can't sell on Amazon. But if I talk about any other category, brand exploration is happening at Amazon. It's not happening on, let me go to the brand website. No, let me go to another brand website. Let's go to another brand website. It's happening on social as well, of course. But I think brands need to understand that the last 3 feet, especially from a brand discovery perspective, in the digital space has become fundamental to drive performance and brand equity.
I agree with that in so many levels. And I mean, I feel like we've seen that with clients over the past 4 years, especially. I mean, I've seen the branding part of what we do become a lot more important and a lot more integrated into the funnel that we're optimizing and analyzing. Yeah, not to go off, but yeah, no, I mean, that's love that.
And you should see the amount of conversations that I have with with third-party providers like Uber Eats, DoorDash, etc. on how are you creating a stronger brand experience within your platform? How are you shifting from just being transactional to including more opportunities for the consumer to engage with us and discover things? I think a good example, for example, is Uber. I think Uber Eats overall and the Uber experience, I find it fascinating, right? Because you are, for example, Shandong sponsors the US Open. You're in the car, you put that you're going to the US Open, right? You're going to Arthur Ashe Stadium. Uber can actually expose you to Moet while you're in the car, while you're looking at where the map is. We know majority of people when they're in Ubers, they actually are looking at the map to just make sure where the car is taking them. You actually have a fantastic opportunity to show up as a brand at that moment and talk about Moet when they are in what I call a transactional journey, right? At that point, they're just sitting there in the car, they're going somewhere, they're checking their journey. But then it's a fantastic place where they have available time to expose them to the brand and allow them to discover it so that when they arrive at Arthur Ashe, they go get a glass of Moët de Chandon. Typically, the way the brand would think about it would be, oh, I need to put billboards, I need to put stuff on the way there so people see it. But most people are actually looking at their phones inside the car. So that's where I believe there's an opportunity, honestly.
Yeah, I think while it sounds very obvious when you're saying it, most companies believe brand building is done at a different time than transaction.
Yes.
They feel it's actually a different marketing motion. They feel it's a different team. It's a different set of budget. And they don't realize that it is one and the same.
I completely agree. I honestly think that there's certain brands and categories in which the entire consumer brand journey starts with a purchase, not with awareness. I actually think it's very streamlined, right? Think of, again, I use the brands that are incredibly popular on the TikTok shops or on Instagram shopping, etc. A lot of these brands, you have never heard of them. Never. They show up on your feed, you see that a bunch of your friends liked it, you go, you purchase it. That is actually your first interaction with that brand. You first purchased it, and then you try it, and that's where your brand journey actually begins. So it's about understanding in your category, where does my brand journey actually begin with a purchase? Can it begin with a purchase? Especially when it comes to wine. In most of the cases, it does start with a purchase. You taste the wine and you fall in love with it. You don't fall in love with the bottle. You fall in love with the liquid.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Kind of going off that for you, and I think it's going to be actually very related to this question that we just went over. Where do you think the opportunities for you are going to be in the next 12 to 24 months in your e-commerce?
I hate to say the cliche, but unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit cliche. I think I'm obsessed with AI. As a concept overall. I was always obsessed with AI. So first of all, let's not pretend AI is new. Roombas had AI. So AI to a certain SimCity had some level of AI.
Totally.
Right? We get it. I'm fascinated by the most recent enabling technologies that come with the large language models and with the ability for AI to just interact with people in a much more seamless way. Because I don't know if you've seen this, but Google for the first time is starting to see dramatic drops in their advertising and their performance. Why? Because they implemented, I believe, Gemini at the top of the page, and people are not scrolling past it because they're getting the answers that they need out of the engine. People are going into ChatGPT to ask what brands they should be considering or what products they should be considering. People are relying on agentic AI to do the ordering for them. In some cases, I don't even want to look at any of this. I just want you to tell me what's happening. We're going from a place where we had such an explosion of offering and brands and availability that consumers, I think, are actually starting to pull back and are looking for some level of curation in their lives that helps them manage everything. There's too much going on. And because of that, I think AI is just going to become incredibly important, which is what is our ability to sell to an AI agent? What is our ability to talk to one? What is the right level of arguments and content that we need to be creating for us to be picked up by these agents as that's what you're looking for? This is the right brand and the right product for you. So for me, the biggest frontier that we need to brave next is how do we start making content, experiences, whatever you name it, platforms that are agentic friendly, right? That are response friendly. And when I say this, it's not just about putting an AI agent on my e-commerce property, right? And saying, okay, now you can just talk to it and ask for advice on what you should buy. That's not it. That's not it. It's much more about when you utilizing it in your life. You're using ChatGPT, you're using Perplexity, you're using all of these. How are you guaranteeing that your content as a brand is showing up there and it's coming as a recommendation? That is for me the next big frontier that I'm very focused on. It's because I think it will potentially transform the entire shopping journey for consumers. It will completely change the entire brand awareness, consideration, conversion funnel. I think it could have massive repercussion on just consumer behavior in the short and the long-term future.
And do you think the marketing motions are going to be that different than what it was to show up in organic search 15 years ago?
Yeah. I think to a certain extent, listen, I think as humans, we're still humans and there's still some core behaviors and beliefs that we have that I don't think will change. And I think they've been the same for hundreds of years. Some of them have changed a little bit, others have not. I think it's more about the fact that our sophistication with platforms and with engines develops over time. And so let's use search as an example. I think that's a perfect example. When search first came, right? People would go with search, they would go to their result. People didn't have this notion of which result is better. Could something be showing up that is actually not relevant, but it has black hat tactics behind it, and because of that, it's just popping up on the top of the search because somebody did something with their search optimization that smarted them, but not good for the consumer. Then people started using search more. They started understanding, okay, actually, I shouldn't be clicking on these types of links. Now I know that these links are usually not valuable. Then search put advertising on the top. People would click on it because they thought it was the organic search result. They became sophisticated. They understood it was advertising. What started happening? A lot of people that I know, I'm one of those, only starts looking at results on page 2 because that's when the results start becoming authentic and not pushed by a media budget. I think the same is about to happen with AI, and we're going to get more and more sophisticated, and we'll be able to understand what is being manipulated versus what's not being manipulated. I think we're still at that very initial stage of believing too much in what's coming out. I think as consumers and as humans, we will become more sophisticated, understand it better, and yes, it will change the marketing funnel ever so slightly, but just in a slightly different way. Because, for example, you might become aware of a brand in the future because your AI agent put it in your shopping cart and says you should buy this. Versus I went on Instacart and I found it, and because of that, I'm buying. It's just the way that you're going to be introduced to things. It might change a little bit. But otherwise, I still think as humans, we're going to go through the same motions.
Yeah. I had a guest previously who had broached a little bit of this topic and was talking about how there's different methods that, like Gen Z and Gen Alpha are using to go research products and brands now that people who are maybe millennial or older are used to Google and going through that type of funnel. But now you're seeing people go to TikTok and search and look for video form content instead of, a blog article or something, because they've learned that when you're reading those blog articles about the topic, you're actually getting sold. You're in the middle of a pitch. So I love what you're saying, and I think that's a great example of it. But I can definitely see that becoming, I can see what you mean by AI, like people learning, how do I understand like what's being curated for me, what's being sold to me, what is actually my sense of agency, what am I choosing and what am I being told to choose?
Exactly. And how are you informing the AI agent of what you actually want? You're going to be actually giving much more prompts to the AI agent of, I like this, I don't like that, right? This whole idea of us training the AI agent beyond just the macro training that happens behind the language model is just going to become more prevalent, where everybody has their own instance of an AI agent that is customized to them, right? The other example just on that you were saying that I love using is how consumer behavior has changed in restaurants. And I have this conversation all the time, which is, I don't know about you, but when I go to a restaurant, nowadays, what is the first thing I do when I arrive? Pop open the Instagram page.
Yeah.
I want to see what their food looks like.
Yeah. And I would say I go to the Google pictures and then I always look at food.
Right.
And then I look at vibe. And that's
right. I love that you look at vibe.
At.
I love that you look at vibe. No, but if you think about it, just that it changes the entire content strategy for restaurants, right?
It is.
What is your Instagram showing? Is it showing food that these people are going to buy? Because if it's not, you actually might be losing a sale.
Yeah. Yeah. I was joking with my my partner about that the other day, that I like going to like Cheesecake Factory just because you can actually see on the menu what you're going to order.
Nice. I'm the same. I only order Chinese food from places where I can see the picture.
Yeah, and they've always got the same 10 items too, which is great. The same 10 photos.
Exactly. No, it's I love it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. So to wrap up, is there anything you're reading or watching now that kind of is informing how you're seeing the world and what's coming up next?
Yeah, I would say I'm less of a book reader per se nowadays. I'm more, I love my feeds. I love my basically reading smaller articles. If you want shows and etc., I can give you a gazillion shows that I'm watching.
Yeah, let's go with that. Sounds great.
Let me see. I watch a lot of anime, so I'm back on One Piece because it's resumed. Thank God.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm waiting on June because Kaiju number 9 is coming back. Solo Leveling just finished, so I'm kind of done a little bit with the anime cycle. Again, a lot of video games. What am I watching on TV that is relevant? Finished White Lotus, Severance, which was fantastic.
Nice.
That's what I'm watching nowadays. Again, a lot of video games. I also play a lot of gacha games. So I'm playing Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail and a gazillion of those that are too expensive for my wallet. But then from a feed perspective, what I've really started getting into recently is just following a couple of, I don't want to call them AI experts because I cringe at that term. It kind of reminds me of when people spoke about digital experts 20 years ago, or digital gurus, which is easily my least favorite expression in the world. So I started following Ethan Mollick's One Useful Thing, which is super, super interesting. Very fascinating articles on the evolution of AI and how it's being utilized. Azim Asdar's, what's it called? It's a blog as well, super interesting. But also I have stuff as well, which is as the space that my basics are in place. So I don't know if any of you has ever looked at the IBM Technology YouTube channel. It's actually really good. It's very simple, I call it basic, but just simply because it doesn't try to make itself very sophisticated. IBM has created a series of videos for the last 2-3 years on AI and what AI means and what is a large language model, what's a foundational model, what's GPT, what does it mean, what's the implication. So I've been spending a lot of time there because it gives you the basics and the fundamentals in a really smart way.
I gotta check that out. That sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really, really, really good. They explain it really well. It's not complicated.
I gotta watch Solo Leveling too. I keep hearing a lot of great things about that show.
Solo Leveling is awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's very good. Good shonen. But of course, I mean, also there's Demon Slayer. The movies are coming out later this year, which I'm really excited for.
Yeah.
But also, we're starting to get to the silly season of TV where there's really nothing on because now I'm waiting for Housewives of Salt Lake City to come back. Which means I'm going to be watching Judge Judy reruns until then.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Luis. This was really helpful. Where can people find you? Anything you want to promote?
Yeah. LinkedIn, Instagram. My Instagram is much funnier than I am, honestly. Everybody should follow it. A sense of humor. It's much better. Or my LinkedIn. I'm not picky. If you want to find me on any of those, you won't find me on X, at least for since a while now. But yeah, LinkedIn on Instagram is usually the easiest.
Well, thank you so much.